Thank you, Professor Shivanagi. Uh, it is my indeed such a great pleasure and honor to be able to present a talk at this famous Bleach Talk. I thank you, Professor Shivanagi, for your kind invitation. The topic is this Sravakayana from Ajanta, from Sravakayana to Bodhisattvayana amid Hunnic turmoil. So this is what I'm presenting here is my work done. Although I spent nearly 3 decades studying Ajanta. My first decade was spent in basically like a student, as any other students, learning and seeing and reading. The second decade was studying in more explorations and learning what other authors have written on the subject and going deep inside it, but I did not have any original research of my own. It is only in the last 5 to 7 years that it looks like I have gone into areas which are new to me at least. And therefore, in this presentation, the time given to me about 40 minutes, I would like to confine myself to about 15 slides. And there's so much to talk about. The presentation will be based on my latest publications in the last 5 years. My approach to exploration is like any other good scientist. It is based on the best scientific principles as best as a researcher can follow. And my approach is interdisciplinary. So epigraphy, numismatics, and iconography, textual sources, architecture, and physical evidence, archaeology, everything. So I go into every direction, although I'm not an expert in all these disciplines, but I try to learn new things. And therefore, the approach is interdisciplinary. And a novelty in my approach is that I use data science. So there are many computer scientists in my family, and I learned from the young generation and how do they what is data science. So I learned that it is something very nice, and so from these various disciplines relating to my subject, I gather a data, historical data, and I feed it into computer and huge data sheets and put everything in computer and then make an analysis and then come to conclusions. So that has less and less scope of subjectivity and therefore less and less scope of errors. And therefore, ultimately, a researcher is convinced that my conclusions are not coming from my head, but coming from the data. And but then, like any data scientist, one has to be careful about data, the source of data, the verification of your data, the reliability of your data. And if you commit an error in your data, then your conclusions are bound to be wrong. So that is also a risk. And then, as like I try to be now in the last 5 to 7 years, I try to go into basic research, basic science, fundamental science, in trying to ask fundamental questions and trying to find the answers. And therefore, when I did that, I got some revelations, and I will have the opportunity to share some of that with you. Uh, One of the recent approach that I adopted was that I just widened my lens. I had a wider view. Ajanta in the map of Eurasia. So before me, in the last 100 years, people who studied the subject, they studied it from the boundaries from within the boundaries of India, as it was a local phenomena, regional and geographical phenomenon. So when I widened the canvas, Ajanta in Eurasia, then many things I was able to say. And I will have the chance to reveal some of those connections with you. And in this talk, India is a word that is going to be used frequently. By India, I would like to qualify that I mean the present borders of India. We know that the borders of our land has been changing in different times, and historians know it best. I don't want to take those risks. I simply mean that by India, wherever I'm going to use, it means the present borders of India. So shall we begin with where we stand? We know that Ajanta was discovered in the early 19th century. Some say 1819, which is not actually correct. But as far as the published literature in the modern scientific disciplines goes, The first publication we know was in 1821. And so from 1821, we are here in 2024 now. It's exactly 2 centuries and 2 years. So much water has passed under the bridge, and our information is now much expanded. So it's time now, briefly, for a few minutes, take a stock of where we stand. From because this monument was not known to us before, at least to the modern man. The regional Adivasis and local villagers perhaps knew about it, but it was inhabited by tigers, as we are told. So even the local probably would not have gone there. So the thing is, in the last 2 centuries, if you go by published literature on this subject, we have been trying to know who made Ajanta, when was it made. Scholars have spent a lot of time trying to find out when was it made, who made them, why these caves were made, and how they were made. So basically these are basic questions. And have we found the answers? Well, if you ask me, I have gone through a majority of the published literature, and I can tell you that the answer to these questions, uh, only about 10% of surety we have, as far as I understand. And most of this, 90%, I would say, something like that, we are still ignorant. A huge level of ignorance that we are still persisting. This ignorance is still persisting. So the moment the more we go deeper, the more we get aware of our ignorance, how little we know about this monument. This is my personal assessment. You may not agree with this. Notwithstanding that, it is true that great many scholars have produced great many great works. And presenting a picture of all the scholarships in the last 2 centuries will be impossible task in this given time. That is also not the purpose of this presentation. But in 1 minute, I can simply relate that in the recent times, in the last few decades, these people, some people have made very, very significant contributions, and those people must be named. One is Professor Dieter Schingloff from Germany. He spent nearly 7 decades in only one aspect of Ajanta, and that is on trying to unravel and understand the iconography of the narrative paintings of Ajanta. So, and he's published a great corpus of 3-volume work called Handbook of Ajanta Paintings. Is published by published by Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts. And so that's a very great work, significant work. And he has presented an example of the great German scholarship in the 21st century. And as far as I'm able to see, I was not able to find significant errors in that work. It's very much reliable. The second work, his student, now a great scholar, is Professor Monica Zen. And she did another extension of that scholarship. And she focused on non-narrative themes of Ajanta, called devotional themes and ornamental themes of Ajanta. And in that, she also produced 2 volumes. That is also a second volume of the handbook series. It's published in German, but English, I think, version is coming. IGNC, I think, is going to publish that. So these 2 works are very much significant. When we talk about Ajanta, we'll have to talk from here, and we cannot go backwards to former scholarship, because knowledge is being updated constantly on every discipline, in economics, in physics, in chemistry, in AI, in everywhere. Our knowledge is expanding. Even in Ajanta, our knowledge is expanding. So we will base our talk on these scholars, and from here onwards, and not go backwards. So because they have updated our knowledge on many topics. And as far as the chronology, dating, and how the caves evolved, developments is concerned, Professor Spink is widely known, his work. Now, Spink is a very a tall scholar. He is also a somewhat a scholar who has invited two kinds of mixed opinions. There are people who believe in Spink's scholarship, and there are also readers and people, his readers, who he has critics, who do not rely on Spink and who think that his works are not are not very reliable. There are a few. In fact, there are five scholars, in fact, published critical comments against his theories initially, and as far as my point of view is concerned, I believe that according to my study in the last 3 decades, I believe that Professor Spink's chronology of Ajanta, of those 2 decades, trying to put Ajanta in 2 decades, is scientifically valid in my personal judgment, according to my studies. My studies has brought me to the same conclusion. So this is so therefore I would like to begin from here. And there is another aspect called Bodhisattvayana. It is a relatively new topic in the Ajanta studies. Here I would like to take the name of 4 scholars. One is Bhikkhu Bodhi, second is Peter Skilling, third is Samuels, and fourth is Vincent Tournier in London. These 4 scholars have very recently written something about Bodhisattvayana. So we did not have, it is Bodhisattvayana is also an evolving topic, an evolving subject, and there's a great future for scholarship. These are very rich in scholarship, and I will have more opportunity to share something about this in this talk. Another area is Muli Sarvastivada. Sarvastivad or Mul Sarvastivad. This is also something relatively new. In the last few decades, it has emerged, and it appears that Ajanta has a deep connection with this Mul Sarvastivad or Sarvastivad schools. And I cannot name any 1 or 2 scholars in this, because there is a whole battery, very large group of scholars in various countries, in various universities, are involved in the scholarship of Sarvastivad. And it looks like Ajanta has a very deep connection with Sarvastivad Buddhism, and which revises our earlier understanding that Ajanta had very little connection with Pali Buddhism. It had very little connection with any other Buddhism. It had greater connection with Sarvastivad or Mul Sarvastivad Buddhism, as I will have the opportunity to explain in this talk ahead. Coming to the question about origin, this is early Buddhist rock cut architecture. You know, it is made, Ajanta is made in the example of rock cut architecture, and on the origin of how Buddhist architecture began, there's a lot of scholarship on that. And my personal opinion is something close to what James Ferguson and James Burgess had written in 1880. And they had drawn our attention towards a possibility that the beginning of Buddhist rocket architecture that really began with the Ashokan times had something to do with with the rocket architecture found in, for example, Petra, Jordan, and in the Eastern Mediterranean regions in West Asia, Iran, Iraq, Mesopotamia, and certain examples in northwest of India. We do not have such mountains, but there are other architectures which have been found, and those have some kind of plans which is resembling like this. So I'm, after a very long period of time, after about 1.5 centuries, I'm a researcher who kind of thinks that yes, beginning of Indian rock cut architecture has something to do with the traditions in Eastern Mediterranean and West Asia and Mesopotamia and northwest of India. I will show some slides to you in support of what I'm saying, plates number 18 and 19. Okay, so let's see here. This is one cave, and cave number one. And you know what happened here? Something very interesting. Initially, they wanted to make a stupa here, stupa shrine. And for the stupa shrine, they first cut this central block, something called central block. So from here, it was a square cube. This is the outer line of that cube. This is the another outer line of that cube. This is the down line of that cube. It was a central cube in the center of this chamber. And initially, a stupa was being built here, just like we have in Bagh. And so stupa shrine was the first idea. If we once we know that there was initially they wanted to make a stupa shrine, and later on they stopped the work on the stupa. They made the cubical block, and they were going to carve a stupa out of that block. But during that time, an influx from northwest of India came here during the because of the Hunic problem. There was this Alkan Hun who were fighting among themselves in northwest of India, and there was a lot of turmoil going on. So a lot of refugee crisis and mass migration was happening everywhere. So I have uh, written a work on this. So there were many mass migration. One of the mass migration came towards Ajanta, came to Western India, came to Middle India, went towards the Bagh region, went to Dhamnar, went to all these Gujarat regions, and came to Ajanta region also. And when they brought the idea of Pratima Puja. So for the first time, Pratima cult, puja, image cult was introduced in this region. It was introduced in Andhra much earlier in the 1st century AD itself. It was introduced in Mathura in North Gangetic Valley and Yamuna Valley in 1st century itself. But as far as the Middle India is concerned, Western India is concerned, Deccan is concerned, these were old Sravakayanists who were not into image worship. Now this idea of image worship comes. And this idea of image worship came along with a new yana, that is Bodhisattvayana. Now, Bodhisattvayana was not Mahayana, because the idea of the Bodhisattva is very much ingrained within Sravakayana itself. Right from the 1st century BC, we are able to find, and Professor Skilling and Professor Bodhi, they have all, there's a lot of new work going on in this, that in the so-called whatever we call Hinayana word, no more we are using, because Hinayana word is also used only in a few, only 2-3 of the Mahayana texts, not in other Mahayana texts. And in the so-called Hinayana text or in the Sravakayana text, the text of they have not identified themselves as Hinayanist. So therefore, it is a wrong terminology that we modern scientists should be using. The correct terminology is Savakayana, and Savaka is the word that is profusely used in all the literature, all the scriptures of the Savakayanists. So when we are naming Ajanta, of which yana was it, where Hinayana is the wrong word to use, and therefore Savakayana is the correct word of use. Now, Sarnavayana again had more than 20 schools. We don't know which school was it here. But when this stupa was being made in the 5th century AD, that time it was Savakayana only. And now the Savakayana was suddenly changed, discarded, and transformed with a new yana, Bodhisattvayana, which was also within Savakayana only. It was not Mahayana, because here in Ajanta, you are not able to find any of the Mahayana gods. You will not find Manjushri, you will not find Tara, you will not find Achobhya, you will not find Vairochana, etc. Here it is, Bodhisattva becomes so much important. So somehow, but here one thing you can see how Bodhisattva was being added later on. When they make, in this image, when they made this Buddha image, when the image cult came, it was like a fever. I will show you a lot of shrines here, not only this shrine. In all the shrines, same story I will be able to show you, that they made they rejected the idea, discarded the idea of stupa, and then they said, let us make image now, because they adopted this new cult, because it was within Sravakayana only, Pratima Puja. And when Pratima, they adopted the idea, they made it here, but there was not very sufficient space for the bodhisattvas. So look at this. This bodhisattva does not have proper space. He does not, this bodhisattva is somehow not very comfortably, his full body, it was not, there was no space in this central block for these images to be carved. So somehow very inconveniently it was carved, and the back side of it was not carved, because even before they would carve the back side of it, this idea came and stupa was just discarded. Now we will go to another cave and see another this thing. Now we will go to see what is the case in another cave. How these transformations happen. This thing is disturbing me. Yeah. Here also, these bodhisattvas were carved later on, and but the cave number 2, it is not very much clear. In cave number 4, it is more clear. Look at this. Here also, it is just one block. You can see what is happening on this left side. Look at this bodhisattva body. Buddha is sitting very comfortably over here, because at the time when they were making this idea of central block, and you can see the rear wall, they were excavating this wall because a stupa, and this, look at this stone here, this line, and how it goes. If you can see this, look, even you can see this line going from here, because there was a central block. In Mahad also and many other places, everywhere it was happening the same case. Everywhere they were actually going to carve a stupa over here, because if you were originally planning to carve a Buddha image and Bodhisattva image, there is no reason why you will excavate this corridor on the left side and this corridor on the right side, and inside there is no circumambulation behind. There is nothing to go. There is no way to go. It's a totally non-functional excavation. This, if so, and it is there in every cave. So this corridor on the left side and this corridor on the right side is an evidence of the former block of stone which was being excavated for making the stupa. Because how will you make a stupa inside a cave? For carving the stupa inside a cave, it is easier if you make a block. If you make a central block and carve the stone around it, and then give a shape to the stupa, because the masons will need to go around that structure in order to carve the stupa. It was a practical necessity, and for that necessity, this left corridor and the right corridor was made. But the stupa idea of the stupa was discarded midway. I will show you some direct example. Let us go to cave number 11. In cave number 11, here also you can see it was a central block, and they were excavating this back side of it, and they fully excavated this back side of it, and there is actually a stupa behind. I don't know whether you can see in this photo, but there is actually a stupa. Behind this, there is a stupa. And they had fully excavated, carved this stupa. But because the idea had changed from the stupa was, nobody wanted a stupa. All from the northwest of India, from the Gandhara, greater Gandhara region, these people came, and during that time, and it was probably 466 AD when this influx came, due to the war scenario that was going on over there, and from that block they started carving this stupa image. and they left they fully carved the image. They even painted it. There is even painted it, and left the rest totally incomplete, because that was really not their interest. They had left interest in the stupa. So there was this yonic transformation from Sravakayana to I will show you more evidence in cave number 16. This is cave number 16, which is everybody knows this was being patronized by Varahadeva, who was the prime minister of the Vakataka king Harisena. This cave has an inscription. In that is a very long, lengthy inscription. In that inscription, name of ruling king Harisena is mentioned, and his prime minister Harisena, and whole dynasty genealogy is given. And so he was like, what, he was a very powerful king. And according to our understanding, the Vakatakas were so powerful at the time. South of Narmada, from the east coast to the west coast of India, it was a very big, large empire. Professor Spink has written, but I have also written recently a book in which I have produced additional examples, more evidence to suggest that there was really an empire. It was not just a kingdom. And the Traikutakas, the Olikar, the Parivrajakas, and the Eastern Vakatakas, the Western Vakatakas, they had all made a consortium, a kind of, which I call GWAP, Gupta, Vakatak, Olikar, and P. Parivrajaka and T. Trakutaka. They had made a coalition. Coalition is some kind of mini NATO kind of scenario to defend against the Huna. Because you know that in 455 AD, we have an inscription in Junagadh of Skandagupta in which he gives the name of, says that Mlechas and the Huna. It was very difficult. He was able to defeat them with great difficulty, and he had to sleep on the bare earth. And we know that it was done, that is a dated inscription in 455 AD. So you know that, and what is happening according to Professor Spink, Ajanta is happening starting just after 5 years of that Junagadh inscription. So you have to understand the political climate, what was happening here, to understand, because these Hunas were raiding, and Haskand Gupta just died after that. But Ghatotgut Gupta also died, and many other kings died. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of warfare going on, a lot of mass migration, a lot of refugee crisis, what is happening in Ukraine and what is happening in right now in conflict in Middle East right now. So it leads to refugee crisis, and that time a lot of refugee crisis was happening. So when these refugees were coming, they were coming with new ideas, powerful ideas, and they were also coming with lots and lots of money. So here also you can see that there was a stupa. Here also, they had a plan to carve a stupa, and a stupa was probably carved here also. This is a straight line. They had removed all the stone for the stupa. And after that, they decided, we want the image. This is the socket over here, and for 2 centuries, people have wondered, what is this socket doing here? It's very finely and neatly carved. There is no crack, there is no hole, nothing like that. There's no flaw in the rock. Now, I have recently proposed that probably a relic casket was placed over there. That relic casket was originally intended for the stupa. Now you discarded the idea of the stupa, and now you say, I want a Buddha image. So where do you put the relic casket? You put the relic casket right over there. And so this is a conjecture. Of course, I do not have evidence to suggest this. But relic casket have been found in caves. For example, Professor M.N. Deshpande had done the excavation in Pitalkhora, and relic casket has been discovered from the rock cut stupa of Pitalkhora. It was also found from Bhaja. So relic casket, relics were found even in rock cut caves. In this case here, it looks like, unless we find a better explanation, which in 2 centuries of scholarship we have not been able to find, what is this? This is my conjecture. So this is now here what happens. Why I'm saying this? Many phases of work you can see over here, many layers of work. At the time when this Buddha image was being carved, there was no idea of Bodhisattva, and therefore there was no place for Bodhisattva. There was a monolith, there was a cube here, and look at this Bodhisattva, behind the throne. This is a Bodhisattva behind the throne. It's just like because there was no space. If you carve the Bodhisattva here, where would you carve the Buddha's Singhasana, lion thrones and all that? So because all this rock was already removed, and they had no idea at the time when they were making this cuboidal block of stone in the center for the stupa, original stupa, which they were planning. They had no idea that they are very soon they are going to discard this whole plan, and very soon they are going to make stupa over here, and for which, you could not compromise with the Buddha image. They had to compromise with the Bodhisattva image, relegated them to the sides. Now, if you see other examples as to what happened, cave number 20, if you see, unfortunately, here Bodhisattvas had a very, unfortunately, we cannot go inside. This Google walkthrough is not able to allow us to go inside, and therefore we cannot. Here also, the Bodhisattvas were in fact not excavated at all. In cave number 21, the scene was so strange. Here, there is no, from here, we cannot go inside, unfortunately, but you can see that Buddha is sitting all alone here. Okay, and no painting, nothing was done. Even Bodhisattva image, at the time when they were finishing the Buddha image, they could have at least blocked out very roughly the Bodhisattva image on the side of it, and not, they in fact removed this wall so that the back wall is very clearly visible in this photograph, because they left no space for carving the Bodhisattva. It is an evidence, it is an iconographic evidence, it is an archaeological evidence that at the time when the sculptor was making this Buddha image, Bodhisattva image was not planned. And therefore, what missed the attention of previous scholars, I'm proposing here, I'm just urging you to see inside. You have to go inside and see and talk with stones, and they will be able to show you that evidence that many ideas had changed. Initially, there was the stupa plan. Now they wanted image. So they carved the image, but at the kind of carving the Buddha image, still Bodhisattva was not in the plan. And after that, Bodhisattva became so important that they all of them went to great limits to somehow accommodate the Bodhisattvas. So a lot of things happened. This was, and look at this in this cave over here. What was happening here? Something very strange. They carved the entire back wall. Okay, it was left incomplete. We are not going into those situations, what happened, why it was left incomplete. We don't have time. But for 1 second, just think why this rear wall was completely flattened and level with chisel without leaving even a trace for image. The reason is because at this time so much was happening, and they decided that we are going to just bring a portable Buddha image, and somehow, because all this experiment which happened in previous shrine, this is a later shrine, of course, because it was left incomplete, because there was a unique attack came near Ajanta, and site was abandoned in 477 AD before this shrine could be completed. But here a very different idea was there, that we are not going to have any central cuboidal rock, no stupa, of course, no central rock. We are all going to have very nice and spacious Buddha image with full compositions, all Gandharvas and all Bodhisattvas very nicely arranged. Like that, they had the plans. thanks to Google, that it is able to show us so much of things. Uh, and most of you must have visited Ajanta already, but I will draw your attention to some of the things that this wonderfully painted caves, this wonderfully painted cave looks like everything was completed, and it was also left actually incomplete. It was never put to worship, and it was abandoned in the very last moment. Something very serious, that unique war happened, and Monica Zinn actually drew our attention, and in that the whole ceiling represents a pattern of beams and rafters. It was the painted format. Actually, initially they were carving the beams and rafters in the ceiling. I will show you in some other caves. Later on, they realized that carving all this, as it was in the contemporary palaces, contemporary houses, it must have been so, because if you are having a very large ceiling, even in today's hall, marriage halls or some conference halls, you know that having a large flat ceiling is very difficult from the point of engineering. You need huge beams. So this is one central beam running from here. You can see this is one central beam running from here. This is one central beam running from here. And this central beam, this central beam, this central beam has many cross beams and cross rafters like this. So it gives us an impression as to how this art of having large ceiling, they had already engineered in those times in 5th century AD. So, and for paintings, actually, we'll have to go closer. Unfortunately, this one does not give much clarity to painting. This is the Janaka episode, and this is the Kalyanakarin. There are 84, totally 90 narrative panels. Professor Shingloff has identified and kind of collected in his corpus. And this is a non-narrative theme, Bodhisattva king in the mountainous landscapes. So this is a Bodhisattva king, and there are all sorts of creatures. This is in the mountains. So there is no narrative. There is no story in this. This is called non-narrative theme. And otherwise, there are other parts. This is a Prabhasa Jataka. There is a Nagakumaras story, Avadana. They're not Jatakas, but Avadana. Let me tell you the difference between those who do not already know the difference between two. Then Buddhist narratives, Jataka word is found basically in the Pali canon, and Avadanas are found basically more in the Sanskrit canon. We have so far, we have not found any manuscript from India. So, and we are very unfortunate that we have not found any manuscripts from India. The Buddhism that we know today, there were more than 20 schools of Buddhism, and some in Mahavansha, at least 24 schools of Buddhism have been named. Only one of them was Theravada Buddhism. That Theravada Buddhism has come down to us till today. In East Asian countries and in Sri Lanka, it was preserved. Continuously, tradition was preserved, and it has come down to us. And it is through us that Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, in the 1950s, he brought it, revived and replanted it back to India. So this Pali Buddhism in Pali language, this Theravada sect of Buddhism had their scriptures in Pali language. So what we have is just one of the canons. It is called canon, one of the collection of scriptures. There were 20 or 24 other canons in other languages, which we do not know. It has not come down to us. But we are fortunate that at least one other canon has come down to us, that is called Sanskrit canon. That Sanskrit canon has not been discovered from India. It has come from, in Germans have found it from the Kizil caves in Central Asia in 1930s in the German expedition. Those manuscripts has been found. They are now in Berlin Museum. And one Sanskrit Buddhist manuscript has been found in Gilgit, which is now in National Archives, India. So they're all 5th century Birch Park palm leaf manuscripts. They're one of the oldest manuscript in the history of humanity. And so like that. So these are some of the about. So what I'm trying to tell you is that if you know that what are these stories and try to find it in Pali scriptures, you will find that certain stories are there in Pali scriptures, but some of the things which have been depicted in Ajanta is not found in the version in the story which is there in the Pali text. So, and on the other hand, if there are some stories, Jatakas in Pali, and it has been depicted here, but you will find that certain depictions are not here from the literature, it is not found in the painting. So there is a discord. Some scenes are found and a lot of scenes are not found. But new discoveries, new manuscript, this Gilgit manuscript, which is still being translated, a large part of Gilgit manuscript and Mul Sarvadesh texts, majority of it has never been translated in any modern languages so far. So it is still a work in progress. Less than 10% or 15-20% has been translated. So our knowledge is still evolving. But whatever that has been translated, thanks to the Germans, Singloff and Monikazin, etc., they have tried to show to us that the Ajanta version of the stories are more closely related with the Sanskrit canon. So that time, if you ask the question, what kind of language they were using, what kind of scriptures they were using, the answer today is they were using some kind of a canon, some kind of sculpture which was cognate or closer or more approximate with the Sanskrit canon, and it was far removed from the Pali canon. Now, I'll take you to cave number lower 6 for a few minutes. Here also you can see they were making this central block, and another evidence of stupa is that they already made the Chhatravali on the ceiling, and there was a stupa already carved here, and from that they reflect the image on the side of it. But this image and that painting, they do not belong to the same time, and it was not in fact planned together. First it was stupa, then came the image, and there is no bodhisattva here, no bodhisattva at all. Okay, so there were many influx. I have a theory of many influxes, many mass migrations happened. So one of the this is a theme of you can say Mahapratiharya, that is miracle of Sravasti. Lots and many Buddhas are depicted here. It was done in the very late time when the site was abandoned and other people came. You can see the socket here, how there is one socket, there is one here, and there is a, so how the door was fitted on this. And if you come out, this was initially this cave, and all the caves actually, this is a flat ceiling. You know, I'll also like to tell you something about this word Chetiya Ghara. You know, this is also a Chetiya Ghara. All of them are Chetiya Ghara. This Chetiya Ghara word is highly problematic, and we have grossly misunderstood the meaning of this word. We have also grossly misunderstood the meaning of the word Vihara. Vihara and Chetiya Ghara word, we should just stop using it, because things were very much changing, meanings were changing, and things were changing. Here, what happens in the northwest of India, because they were making monasteries also in Nagarjunkonda and Amravati. Excavations have shown flat ceiling and quadrangular hall with monastic cells for monasteries and for congregation space, as well as you have this Buddha shrine. So three purposes were there: shrine, congregation, and dwelling. All these three functions were mixed together. It happened in Deccan in the 5th century AD only. Before that, it was not prevalent. This idea in the 5th century was brought from the northwest of India in the 5th century AD in Ajanta. And they realized that carving a walled roof was very difficult. Therefore, they need not make all the cave temples in. So only 2 cave temples they made with vaulted roof. Majority of them, 25 temples in Ajanta, they made with flat ceiling. And in Ellora also, there are 12 temples in Ellora. You will see only one of them is vaulted ceiling. So this wall ceiling, initially in the pre-Christian times, it was very much fashionable, this wall ceiling temple, which we call Chetiyagara. Later on, they decided, no, we don't want all this wall ceiling, because wall ceiling was very difficult to carve. Actually, this is a very great enigma of iconography. It is a mind-boggling iconography. And thanks to Professor Walter Spink, he has done a lot of labor. And I also investigate a little bit. What happens when they first here also, they had a plan of stupa, and later on they discarded the idea of stupa. Fortunately, they had not excavated the central block. And directly there, they made the Buddha image. At that time, one war happened, a battle happened, and the work had stopped for a few years. After that, for 10 years, this cave was abandoned. When the work resumed, for 10 years, when the work resumed, uh, nothing was here. For 10 years, not a single sculpture was here. No bodhisattvas. These bodhisattvas were not there. These Buddhas were not there. Nothing was here. And just this Buddha was here, and this Buddha was also not being worshipped. So a lot of tragedy happened. A lot of tragedy happened in Ajanta is a very tragic site. And not only Ajanta, there are 24 rocket monasteries. They were facing problems with all these Hunnic invasions. So what happened when the site was abandoned? Before abandonment, the original owner, he decided that let me. Oh, sorry, no, I'm getting you wrong. So it was abandoned. The site was abandoned. And the original owner probably did not get the chance to even do the consecration, did not probably get the chance of doing any worship. When the site was completely abandoned, nobody was, no original, on either they were killed or there was a very catastrophic war in 477 AD. And Professor Spink said it was a war between the local kings Rishika and Ashmoka. My published research, I have published some research that it was a very great Hunnic invasion, much before Tormana. Tormana attack, we all know, happened in 492 AD. This is much before that. In 477, there was a very catastrophic attack in which most of the kings were killed in India. In Gupta kings, Aulikar kings, Parivrajak kings, Traikutaka kings, and Vakataka kings, and like that. So I have published a separate book on that. So what happens here? After the site was abandoned, and when the traffic on the highway resumed, then some people like you and I, we entered into these abandoned caves and found nobody here, but found this empty wall over here. And we were coming from Gandhara. Even one Roman coin has been found in Ajanta. So we were coming from Gandhara, because this is an iconography which is never ever found in the 800 years before this time, 5th century AD. This image is 1, 2, 3 Buddha, and here is 1, 2, 3 Buddha. So 3 Buddha on this side and 3 Buddha on this side. These are the Buddhas of the past, attending at the time of his enlightenment, at the time of his first sermon. His Buddha is broken hand because he's giving the first sermon. Who has come first? The Buddhas of the past, 6 Buddhas of the past, they come to attend his first sermon and witness his enlightenment. This is an iconographic theme which was alien to the Buddhist rock cut monuments prior to Ajanta, prior to this time, and this time is around 478 AD or 479 AD. But this theme, iconography, was very much prevalent in Greater Gandhara. So all this iconographic evidence, archaeological evidence, architectural evidence, even numismatic evidence, a lot of scriptural literary evidence points to the fact that there was a huge crisis and mass migration, mass exodus. So those people come here who were like you and I, and few sculptors were around, and they sponsored these Buddha images. And Professor Spink rightly said they were called intrusive because it intrudes upon the original program. But again, let me tell you one more very interesting thing. At the time this Buddha image was being made, these bodhisattvas were still not made. Why? If these bodhisattvas were made, then there will be no stone left for this bodhisattva. Because while carving this bodhisattva, while carving this bodhisattva image, if there was a plan for that bodhisattva will not be carved 2 feet behind the wall. There is no reason or logic for that. And this Buddha will not be here because that bodhisattva will occupy this entire space. So there is a chronology in this iconography. First, this is the phase 1, then phase 2 of the work when these are made, and this wall was just blank. There was a third phase, and somebody came, and when these patrons came from Greater Gandhara, they were not interested. They were not interested in Bodhisattva as much as they were interested in these past Buddhas, this theme. And it was a devotional theme of great significance for them. And they were all Mul Sarvastivadin. Because if you go to the text of the Bodhisattvayanas, you will find a description of why this is philosophically and philologically so important. But then somebody else came the next year, perhaps, and said, look, we can't have a blank wall here without bodhisattvas. We have to have. So somehow the sculptor managed to squeeze very uncomfortably the figure of these 2 bodhisattvas behind here. So a lot of things happened here. And then still there was another phase. This wall was, after some time, more people came and they found some blank walls, and they said, no. We are going to fill all this Mahapratiharya, which is miracle of Sravasti, when Buddha multiplied himself into 1,000 Buddhas. And that is also a very great theme. And that theme, they utilized the entire space and made a hodgepodge of imagery everywhere. So this shrine is also very much important. This Google imagery, you are very fortunate to see, because now if you go to Ajanta, you will not be allowed inside the shrine. It is protected and restricted from tourists. We can go on. There are 30 caves, but this time is limited. I thank Please India Foundation for having considered me for such an occasion.